It's the 2022 World Cup.
It's the squad update for Saudi Arabia. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and today we'll be updating Saudi Arabia's squad for the 2022 World Cup. Well, the final squads are out, so here is the promised update where we look at the selections, the non-selections, the surprises, and the injury updates that we made in our full team podcast, and where we went through all candidates giving career and participation information and predictions of their likelihood of making the squad. So today we're fundamentally checking out how accurate our predictions were, and we'll also update recent games. So check the show notes for links to that full player mediacast, as well as the group mediacast where we took a close look at the team, their history and their chances in this tournament. Let's get started. Once again, I risk the reaching out and slapping the faces of our Saudi Arabian fans by wearing this not Saudi Arabian shirt. But please forgive me. It is a kind of a German B team shirt from a while ago. And the only reason I wear it is because I don't have a Saudi Arabian shirt, and this is the closest color I could find. So sorry, Saudi fans. I'll work on my shirt collection for you. Let's begin with formation. So we're really focused on the recent games, the ones after June 2022, and but we will take a look at kind of the pattern of their formation since the beginning of World Cup qualification, the second round of World Cup qualification, actually, and we'll see actually that. Saudi Arabia was very consistent in their selection in World Cup, or in their formation in World Cup qualifying, going with a 4-2-3-1 all the way through their games. They started to change this up. We'll ignore the Arab Cup because a lot of the first team players, as well as the first team manager, actually wasn't engaged in that. However, it does seem like they drew a couple of players who played well in that Arab Cup, but it's not really part of this discussion because it wasn't the team that will be here at the World Cup. So we'll move on to friendlies, and boy, they played a lot of them. There were two of them in June against Colombia and Venezuela, but we're focused on the ones after that. And really, they played eight games here, so I'll go through them. In September, there were two of them at the end of September against Ecuador and USA. Both of those were 0-0 draws, and we'll look at the formations soon here. We're actually going to ignore the October friendlies that they played, but I will give the results and I'll tell you why we're ignoring them. It was October 22nd, 26th, and 30th, where they played North Macedonia, Albania, and Honduras. So it was a 1-0 win over North Macedonia, a 1-1 draw with Albania, and a 0-0 draw with Honduras. Finally, in November, they also played three games on November 6th, 10th, and 16th, and it was Iceland, Panama, and Croatia. And it was a 1-0 win over Iceland, a 1-1 draw with Panama, and a 0-1 loss to Croatia. So, not really encouraging results. They're basically struggling with teams that aren't making the cup. But maybe the 0-0 draw with USA was pretty good, and the 1-0 win over Iceland. But yeah, and you'll notice that they're all very low-scoring games, so we can expect Saudi Arabia to be a fairly defensive team. And so those are the results, and we're mostly looking at this to look at their formations in this player podcast. So they did change from that 4-2-3-1 formation. They played that in their first September friendly, and then experimented with a 4-3-3 formation for the other September friendlies. The reason we're ignoring the October games is because I couldn't find a website that published the formation for those games. And anyway, it makes it a bit unruly to deal with all 8 games. And furthermore, this sounds like a justification, but the fact is that we seem to get the information that we need from the 5 games that we have. So in November, they continued with the 4-3-3 formation, but then they seem to abandon that and go back to their 4-2-3-1 formation. I think there may be a reason for this that I'll mention later in the podcast. And just to kind of mess me up a bit, they went with a 4-4-1-1 formation in that last friendly against Croatia. So I'm not sure what that means, but we can definitely say that they favor the 4-2-3-1 formation, or that they have, because again, I'm not really sure they're going to go forward with that formation. Again, I'll tell you why later in the podcast. Okay, let us go to the squad, which is what we're here for, and we'll start with the manager. So the dashing Hervé Renard. Hervé Renard is the manager and has been their manager since 2019. We talked about the success he had with African teams, particularly Zambia and Ivory Coast. So Saudi Arabia will hope that he can work his magic with the Saudi Arabian squad. Anyway, we are going to label him in a green highlight for you YouTube watchers, and that indicates that he is a starter. We regard him as the starting manager, as it were. All right, let's go on to goalkeepers, and we'll begin by naming the candidates that were there first and the likelihood we gave them of making the squad. And then we will actually tell you who made the squad, the preliminary and the final squad, and we'll finish with kind of a summary of the positions. So we have a definite candidate, Mohamed Al-Owais, and a likely candidate, Mohamed Al-Yami, but you may hear him being called Mohamed Al-Rubai. And 2 possible candidates in Fawaz Al-Karni and Nawaf Al-Akidi, and 2 possible but unlikely candidates in Zaid Al-Bawardi and Amin Bukhari. And well, we'll start by eliminating some of these names from the squad. So the 2 possible but unlikely candidates did not make it. So that is Zaid Al-Bawardi and Amin Bukhari. We will, okay, so we'll just go back to the beginning for the rest. Mohamed Al-Owais, our definite candidate, is selected, as well as Mohamed Al-Yami, or Mohamed Al-Rubai, and Nawaf Al-Adidi, the possible candidate, he was selected, but the other possible candidate, Fawaz Al-Kami, was selected for the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. So we remove him from the list. That leaves us with those 3 goalkeepers, Mohamed Al-Owais, Mohamed Al-Yami, or also called Mohamed Al-Rubai, and Nawaf Al-Akidi. So in terms of the position, it was Mohamed Al-Owais playing all World Cup qualification games except for 2 in the middle, where Mohamed Al-Yami started. And in the recent friendlies, it was Al-Owais who started 4 of the 5 games, and Al-Yami started 1. And yes, we will talk about our predictions at the end of the podcast, but I think it's fairly obvious in that case. Let's move on to central defenders. And here we have quite a few candidates to go through. They always play with a 4-man backline, so we are expecting 2 defenders on the field, 2 central defenders, I should say, and then 2 outside defenders, which we'll do after this. So the likely candidates are Ali Al-Buhaili. So, yeah, we didn't have any definite candidates here. Ali Al-Buhaili and Abdoulaye Al-Amri, the 2 likely candidates. We also have 5 possible candidates. So Ahmed Sharahili, Abdullah Madu, Ali Lajami, Hassan Tambakti, and Zayad Al-Sahafi, the 5 possible candidates. It seems to be off the squad, and we'll eliminate them as we go if they didn't make it. That is Mohamed Al-Kabrani, and he did not make the squad. And then we mentioned a few retired players from the 2018 World Cup mostly. So Osama Hasori, Omar Hasori, and Mohammed Al Fatil. Of course, none of those making it. We just talked about them to put the team in context. Let's go back to the beginning, and we have Ali Al-Bulehi as making the squad, as well as Abdullah Al-Amri. Among the possible candidates, we predicted that most of them would come. We were thinking 3 or 4, but in fact, only 2 of them were selected. So that was Abdullah Nadu and Hassan Tambakti. Both of those selected, but the other ones were not, even for the preliminary squad. So Ahmed Sharahili, Ali Lajami, and Zayad Al Sahafi not selected for the squad. So that leaves us with just 4 central defenders. That is Ali Al-Bulehi, Abdullah Al-Amri, Abdullah Madu, and Hassan Tambakti, the 4 successful candidates. And we'll finish with a summary of the positions. So Al-Amri was the most regular starter from 2021, but did only start about half the games. The rest rotated quite a lot. However, it was clarified a bit in the, clarified pretty clearly in the friendlies, with Al-Amri and Al-Bulehi each starting 4 of the 5 recent friendlies, and Tambakti starting 2. No other candidate here, or I guess that would just be Abdullah Madu. He didn't start any. So again, kind of easy to guess who the starters are, but we'll review that at the end. And we move on to left backs, where we have definite candidate Yasir Al-Sharani, and 2 possible candidates, Nasser Al-Dosari and Motab Al-Hardi. And the successful ones making the final squad, Yasir Al-Sharani and Nasser Al-Dosari, both making the squad, but Motab Al-Hardi not making the squad. So 2 left backs there. And we'll summarize the position with this. Al-Sharani was the main starter from 2021 and was sometimes replaced by Nasser Al-Dosari. Al-Sharani started 3 of the 5 recent friendlies. However, it was not Al-Dosari replacing him in the other 2. He actually started in other positions as a defensive midfielder, but it was 2 different right backs replacing him there. So we're moving on to right backs. I'll tell you who replaced him on the left side there. And we move on to right back. So we have definite candidate Saud Abdul Hamid, and likely candidate Sultan Al Ghanam, and possible candidate Mohammed Al Buraik. And all 3 of them made it, actually. So Saud Abdul Hamid, Sultan Al Ghanam, and Mohammed Al Buraik, all making the final squad. So I wonder if one of those guys will maybe act as backup for the central defense, since they seem a little short of players there. Okay, in summary of the position, Al Ghanam for World Cup qualifying games, but Al Buraik replaced him 3 times, although it was a different replacement who came in for the June friendlies. We had Saud Abdul Hamid as a definite candidate here, but in fact he only started 4 games. He was just often on the bench or subbed in. But he came in more as a starter. He came into the picture more in recent friendlies. Saud Abdul Hamid started 3 of the friendlies, as well as 1 on the left side. Al Ghanam and Al Buraik each got 1 start as the right back, and Al Buraik was the other player getting a start on the left side there. All right. So obviously, also acting as backup for the left side, ahead of left back Al Dossari. Let's move on to the midfield, and we begin with defensive midfielders. So we have a definite candidate Ali Al Hassan and possible candidate Abdullah O Taif. And we have two possible but unlikely candidates, Abdullah Al Kebari and Ali Al Asmari. Neither of those two made it, so we'll remove Abdullah Al Kebari from the list, as well as Ali Al Asmari. And that leaves us with Ali Al Hassan, who did make the final squad, and Abdullah O Taif, who also made the final squad. So, hey, we're doing fairly well in our predictions here. Before summarizing the position, oh, wait a minute, we do have a new candidate also for a defensive midfielder. So someone added to the squad who is not on our radar for the main player podcast there, and this is Riyad Sharahili, also making the squad. So I'll tell a little bit about him because we didn't cover him in the main podcast. Riyad Sharahili was new to the squad in September. He started both of their September friendlies and went on to sub into one of them after that, and was on the bench for the last two. So, yes, jumping in on the squad, that gives him 3 caps since his first one in September 2022. And he's no youngster, he's 28 years old and plays for Abha in Saudi Arabia since 2020. He's played for several teams in Saudi Arabia where he spent his whole career. So, Riyad Sharahili added to the list at the last moment. Good for him. And we'll move on to central midfielders now. And candidates, we have Mohamed Kano and Salman Al Faraj as definite candidates, but actually we're going to move Salman Al Faraj to attacking midfielder because, because that's what he is. So he was a definite candidate here, so we'll move him to the definite level there. I'm just doing that on the graphic. Okay, so back to defensive midfielders, central midfielders. Mohamed Kano as a definite candidate. Likely candidate, Abdullah Al-Malki. And possible candidate, Abdulaziz Al-Bishi. And possible but unlikely, Abdul Malak Al-Kebari. And seems to be off the squad, Hussein Al-Mogabi. So let's eliminate some of the names. So seems to be off the squad, Hussein Al-Mogabi, not selected. Abdul Malak Al-Kebari, also not selected, the possible but unlikely candidate. And even the possible Abdulaziz Al-Bishi, not selected there, leaving us with just Mohamed Kano, the definite candidate, and Abdullah Al-Malki, the likely candidate there. So that gives us kind of 5 defensive / central midfielders, and I'll run through them again. Ali Al Hassan, Abdullah Otaif, the newcomer Riyad Sharahili, and then Mohamed Kani and Abdullah Al-Malki. Abdullah Al-Malki. The name's kind of getting the better of me here. Okay, let's talk about the position and how it's gone since 2021. And Mohamed Kano was the most consistent starter there since 2021. Al-Malki was prominent early on, but we think he might have gotten injured due to a sudden appearance. He subbed out of a game 23 minutes into a game in February and didn't show up after that. So he's still not listed as injured during that time, just off the squad. After he disappeared, it became a bit of a mix and match among the many candidates we saw there. And then in September, the newly added Sharahili started the first 2 recent friendlies. So we were a bit confused about what was going on. But alas, We figured it out because Al Malki returned, and it was a two-man central midfield with Cano and Al Malki repartnering for the last two friendlies. So that's who we think are going to go into the squad, but we'll get to that at the end and move on here to left midfielders. Okay, so left midfielders, we have a definite candidate, Salam Al-Dosari, and a likely candidate, Abdul Rahman Garib. And, well, we listed a retired candidate, Nawaf Al-Abed. And I got to say, I'm not really sure why I added him to the list, because we generally were picking players who had been with the squad from 2021 or forward. He last appeared in 2019, or he had last appeared in 2019. But it turns out it was a bit prophetic. Maybe the fates, maybe Atropos was speaking through me, because well, I'll tell you soon. Because he did make the squad. That's where I'm going with this. Anyway, we'll tell you more about that in a second. Salam Al-Dosari was selected for the squad, but a bit surprisingly, Abdul Rahman Garib was not, even though he was a definite candidate. So that was one of the ones that took us by surprise. And now I'll tell you about Nawaf Al-Abed. So as I said, we introduced him even though he'd been off the squad for a long time. And we didn't go into detail on him because we thought he wouldn't make the squad. So I'll kind of reintroduce him, as it were, because we hadn't given bio information on him. But just to tell you what happened there, he returned after a 3-year absence in September 2022 to replace Fahad Al-Mualad, who was selected for the squad, but then kind of deselected. I'll tell you about him soon. Anyway, Al-Abed returned in September 2022 to start. Didn't start either of their first games, but he did sub in for both matches there. So he has been with Saudi Arabia since 2010 and has 50 caps and 8 goals. So he's a pretty much a veteran for the squad, and he's 32 years old, playing for Al Shabab in Saudi Arabia. In terms of tournaments, he was on the squad for the 2011 Asian Cup, just subbed into 2 games there, and he was a starter in the 2015 Asian Cup. However, he was not selected for the 2018 World Cup due to injury. He had not fully recovered from a foot injury there, but he had scored 5 of their goals in qualifying there, 4 of them on penalties. So we might look for him as the penalty taker in this tournament. And he, after that, wasn't selected for the Asian Cup 2019. So it kind of seemed like his international career had dwindled down. But lo and behold, he gets called up as a replacement here. And is going to be on the squad. So Nawaf Al-Abed, a pretty interesting story. So we'll change his title from retired to new, because in a sense he is a new player coming back like that. Okay, so he made the squad. And we move on to right midfielders. No, we have to give a summary of left midfielders here before we move on. So left midfielders, the left midfielder position, kind of the defensive end of that position, is not often used in the 4-2-3-1 formation that they favor and used for all of the World Cup qualifying games. So when they did use the left midfielder position, it was in those 3 games where they had a 4-3-3 formation, and it was left defender, actually, Nasser Al-Dosari, who always filled it. And those were done in the friendlies, September friendlies. We saw Al-Dosari there. So no one here played as kind of a defensive midfielder. But some of these guys, though listed as left midfielders, they're really attacking left midfielders. So on the offensive side, Salam Al-Dosari was the main man playing left attacking midfielder, or depending on the formation, left winger or left forward in the various formations. And so, yeah, he's the guy over there, Salam Al-Dosari. So we'll have to see if Nawaf Al-Abed kind of beds into the team. That was a terrible pun. He immediately feels a flash of hot embarrassment at his low-hanging fruit joke, but he forges on. Okay, let's move on to right midfielders, and we have Hatan Bahebri here, and I want to actually move a player who is listed as a forward. I want to move him to the right midfielder position. So I'm going to go down and grab Fahad Al Muwalad, and actually I should put him above Hatan Bahebri there, and we'll talk about him. So these are the two candidates, and just to announce who made it, Hatan Bahebri did make it. So we'll dispense with him before we talk about Fahad Al Muwalad. So Fahad Al Muwalad did make it, and it's a bit of an interesting story. He was selected and then he was unselected. So I'll tell you why. He had a doping ban that was scheduled to end in September, but he was cleared by the Saudi Arabian authorities, Saudi Arabian anti-doping authorities. So he was allowed to be named to the squad. But the decision had to go to the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, kind of a famous anti-doping agency there. However, the manager decided to withdraw him as a precautionary measure before that happened. So my guess is the manager or the administration maybe felt that he wouldn't pass the ban, basically, and so they removed him and replaced him with the player we just saw, Nawaf Al-Abed. So there we have it, and that's a really big loss because Fahad Al-Muwalad is a really big player for them. He, I think, is their top scorer. I won't describe it here because we're going to run into him later when we look at forwards. But we had him as a likely candidate because he had started 13 of their 20 games. And it was only at the end that he was banned for. And yeah, okay, let's move on. So Hatan Bahebri, though, making the squad, and we'll summarize the position. So on the defensive side of the position, again, like the left midfield, it's not often used in the 4-2-3-1. And when they did use the position in the 4-3-3, it was 3 out-of-position players who filled it. So none of the players that we've listed here. On the attacking end, it was Fahad Al Muwalad all the way through World Cup qualifying until the last game, where Hatan Bahebri replaced him. So Bahebri played it one more time. But actually, it seems that without Al Muwalad available, they abandoned the 4-2-3-1 formation that uses the position. So this is what I was talking about during formations, that as much as they've used the 4-2-3-1, I wonder if they will use it when Al Muwalad is not here. So Al Muwalad's replacement, as we saw, Al Abed, is not a like-for-like replacement. He's a left midfielder, and I suppose he or a left midfielder could fill the position, but they haven't really done that yet. The one time they used the 4-2-3-1 in friendlies, Al Muwalad was back for that game. So yeah, kind of interesting to see whether they will continue with that formation. Okay, we'll move on to left wingers, and in fact, we've pretty much covered them with left and right midfielders. So but we do have one candidate as a left winger, and that is Khalid Al Ghanam. But Khalid Al Ghanam was not selected for the squad. And I'll summarize the position. So only in the last game with that 4-4-1-1 did they use a formation that had wingers. And actually in the previous podcast, or maybe it was the team podcast, we said that they were a bit weak on the wings here, and generally don't use the position. So the one time it was used, it was left attacking midfielder Salam Al-Dosori who played there. Moving over to the right wing, we have two candidates, Ayman Yaya and seem to be off the squad, Abdul Fattah Al-Siri. So neither of these players were selected either. So we'll remove them from the list. Possible candidate Ayman Yaya, not selected, and nor was Abdul Fattah Al-Siri. So yeah, just like on the left, only in the last game did they use this winger formation. And the forward, Firas Al-Burakan, who we'll meet soon, was the player who played in that position. Okay, and we are moving on to forwards here. And so we'll start with attacking midfielders. And we have Salman Al-Faraj as a definite candidate and Sami El-Najeh as a likely candidate. And we have a possible candidate in Turki Al-Amar. And Turki Al-Amar, the possible candidate, did not make the squad, but Salman Al-Faraj, the definite, and Sami Al-Najeh, the likely candidate, both made it. So let's summarize the position. We have Salman Al-Faraj playing the position throughout World Cup qualifying, but he was replaced 3 times towards the end by 3 different players. So actually the position was not used in the first few recent friendlies, but when they did return to it, it was Sami Al-Najeh starting one and Al-Faraj starting the other. So again, it kind of comes down to whether they're going to change their formation in the absence of Al-Mu'allad. Okay, and I should actually say Salman Al-Faraj is coded as a central midfielder. Again, Saudi Arabia is a bit difficult to distinguish the central midfielders and attacking midfielders in terms of their coding, because the ones who are coded as left, right, or central midfielders may actually be left attacking, right attacking, and central attacking midfielders, as Salman Al-Faraj is here. He is the captain, by the way. Anyway, we moved him from central midfielder to attacking midfielder here. All right, well, we have secondary strikers. One possible candidate in Abdul Rahman Al-Oboud, and he did make the squad. So, but he didn't start any of their games after he after he came to the team in October 2021. Let's move on to forwards. We won't do a summary of secondary strikers. They'll probably be lumped in either with the attacking midfielder or the forwards. So let's do forwards, and we have a definite candidate, Firas Al-Burakan. And we had Fahad Al-Mu'allad here, but we moved him to right midfielder, so we'll get rid of his name here. Salah Al-Sheri is a likely candidate, and a possible candidate in Abdullah Al-Hamdan and also Haytham Asiri. And finally, we talked about the retired candidate Mohammed Al-Salawi, a big loss for them. You can see actually, if you're watching the YouTube feed, that all of the forwards that we've listed here are in light grey. That means they have no tournament experience. So they're all kind of inexperienced, and they lost the very experienced Mohammed Al-Talawi. So these guys will have to try to fill his big shoes. Okay, in terms of successful candidates here, Firas Al-Burakan made the final squad, and so did Salah Al-Sheri. And among the possible candidates, Abdullah Al-Hamdan made the preliminary squad, but not the final cut. However, Haytham Asiri did make the final cut was selected for the squad. So that is it. We just need to do a summary of the forward position. We'll be ready to move on. So it was actually Salah Al-Shehri, Salah Al-Shehri in World Cup qualification. But from game 5, the position was equally shared between Firas Al-Burakan and Al-Shehri. In the friendlies, though, in the recent friendlies, it was Al-Burakan started 4 of the 5 games and Salah Al-Shehri the last. So it looks like Al-Burakan has kind of pulled ahead in the pecking order there. And we'll come back to that when we look at scorers. We're going to look at a few stats. So we had some stats for the in the previous podcast about all the definite, likely, impossible players. Here we're kind of doing the same thing, but just with the 26 players that were selected. So let's begin with the average age. It's 27.3. And that's slightly above average. 27.1 is the average age of the teams have done so far for this cup, and there are about 18 teams on the list there. And we have actually just one player who is 33 or older, so no kind of aged players on the squad in terms of soccer players. And we have 3 players who are 22 or younger. So we'll take a quick look at that with this chart that I'm putting up. And yes, it's Salman Al-Faraj, who is the oldest player there. And yeah, and then all in all, but the average age is a bit old, and that's because they have 8 other players, so 9 players in all who are above 30 years old. So they're all actually pretty tight range there between 28 and 32. And at the other end of the scale, we have the forward, Firas Al-Burakan. I said the forwards were kind of young. He's 22 years old, and I'm looking for Sherry there. He's 29 years old, so he's not young, but he is inexperienced. And Nawaf Al-Akidi and Haytham Athiri, both 22 or younger. Okay, for average caps, we have 28.2, and this is very low, actually. The average is 34, and Saudi Arabia, one of the lowest here. Oops, I put 18.2, but it's 28.2 average cap. So we'll just look at the main ones here, and we see that Yasser Al-Sharani is the most cap player with 71, and then left attacking midfielder Salam Al-Dosari at 70, and captain Salman Al-Faraj, also the oldest player, with 69 caps. After that, it drops off quite a bit to 54, and then the next one is 45. So only 4 players with 50 or more caps. At the other end of the scale, we have 6 players with 10 or less caps. So I won't go through those names, but not a lot of experience compared to other teams there. All right, let's move on to total goals. That is 64 among these 26 players, and the stat we use is total caps per goal in order to compare them with other teams. Saudi Arabia is 8.7. So both of those, total goals and total goals per caps, are extremely low. The average of total goals is 116. So they have almost half that much. And the average goals per cap is 13.2. And they're at 8.7. That's the lowest on my list, but I haven't done all the teams yet. So, we saw that the goal scorers are kind of new players and don't have any tournament experience. We saw too that they had very low scoring games in their friendlies, just 1 goal or no goals. Let's take a look at the scorers here, and we see that Salam Al-Dosari, the left attacking midfielder, has the most goals with 17. That's 17 in 70 games, 25% scoring ratio, or 24.3, which is not bad, actually. And maybe they'll be relying on Saleh Al-Sheri, although he doesn't seem to be the starter. He has 10 goals in 19 games, and I doubt he'll keep up that average, but that's pretty good, 50%. 52.6% there. So maybe he'll make a name for himself in this cup. The other forward, Firas Al Burakein, has 6 goals in 26 games, 23%. That's not that great. It's not terrible either. And then, and that's kind of it as far as scorers go. Salman Al Faraj at 11.6%, and actually Nawaf Al Abed, that's the player who came in at the very end, was kind of off the squad and then recalled. He has 8 goals in 54 games, which is 14.8%, so that's not terrible either. I just wonder if he'll still have the same form that he used to have, because he hasn't played for the team since 2019. Okay, let's move on to summaries. And the first one we'll do is the notable non-selections. So we really only have one that took us by surprise here, and that was left midfielder Abdul Rahman Garib. So we had him as a likely candidate, but he was not selected for the squad. We have a surprise inclusion, Abdullah Al-Malki. And the reason that was a surprise is because, we said in February he kind of disappeared from the squad, and we were wondering what became of him, but he kind of came back in October and is probably going to be a starter. The new candidates, we have defensive midfielder Riyad Sharahili. And we also have Nawaf Al Abed. He's anything but a new player, but new in the sense that he came back, having been off the squad, came back to replace Al Muwalad there. So new in a sense. Okay, let's look at injuries. And actually, Saudi Arabia is pretty blessed as far as this goes. Players who were injured but recovered, none. Players who were injury doubts but still added to the roster, none. Players who were dropped due to injury, none. But we will put Fahad Al Muwalad in this category. He was dropped due to that the doping banning situation, but kind of fits in this category. So that is a big loss to them, Fahad Al Muwalad, but it is the only loss. We even have a category for players who were injured but who weren't strong candidates in the first place. And again, none. No one in that category. So they've been very lucky avoiding injury there. And we're going to finish now with the predicted starters. I instantly popped up the list there, and let's go. So for manager, Hervé Renard, of course, we consider him a starter in that sense. Goalkeepers, we have Mohamed Al Awais, Mohamed Al Yami, sometimes called Mohamed Al Rubai, and we won't do definite, likely, impossible. Nawaf Al Akidi, those 3 goalkeepers. And we had nominated Al Awais as the starter, and we remain sure of that. Not much argument there. Okay, central defenders. The candidates are Ali Al Bulehi and Abdullah Al Amri, and we also have Abdullah Madu and Hassan Tambakti, and we think the starters there are going to be. Well, actually, in the previous full-length podcast, we hadn't nominated any starters because we thought it was too much of a rotation. But in review, we did think that we should have put Al Amri as a starter, as one of the starters. But the rest really did rotate too much for us to speculate. or well, we speculated, but to actually come to a conclusion. The recent friendlies, though, make things much clearer, and we now see Al Amri and Al Bulahi as the starters, with Tambakti as the first choice for backup keeper there. On the left backs, we have Yasser Al Sharani and Nasser Al Dosari. And in fact, in the previous podcast, we plumb forgot to do that one. We just moved straight from central defenders to right backs. So, but we would have picked Al Sharani, and we will reaffirm that here. We think he's going to be the starter. Okay, for right backs, we saw the candidates are Saud Abdul Hamid, Sultan Al Ghanam, and Mohammed Al Buraik. And we saw in the full length podcast Al Ghanam as the starter, even though Saud Al Abdul Hamid had been a definite candidate. He had only started 4 of their 20 games, so he was a definite because he was always called up, not because of his starts there. However, in the recent friendlies, Saud Al Hamid was the most used player, and now he seems the most likely, although we do consider all of them possible. However, we do think the recent selections in the friendlies represent the starting squad. So we're going to change our call here from Sultan Al Ghanam to Saud Abdul Hamid. We think he's going to start. Okay, defensive midfielders and central midfielders. We have the following candidates: Ali Al Hassan, Abdullah O Taif, Riyad Sharahili, Mohamed Kano, and Abdullah Al Malki. Those are the 5 candidates. And we had nominated Kano as a starter, and actually we had Al Faraj on the list here, but we're going to talk about him with attacking midfielders. He does play central midfielder sometimes, but not enough to consider him as a starter there. There's still no news that Al Malki was injured, but he has returned and he has renewed his partnership with Kano. So we think those two will be the central pairing. They were in the last 2 friendlies. So we're going to nominate Mohamed Kano and Abdullah Al Malki as the starters in the central midfield. In left midfield, for defensive left midfielder, we think actually the left defender, Nasser Al Dosari, will play left midfield if the position is used. However, it wasn't used enough for us to consider him a starter. So we had nominated Salam Al Dosari as a starter for the left attacking midfield, and recent games have strengthened our conviction there. Meanwhile, Abdul Rahman Garib is in red here because he was the surprise non-selection for us there. Okay, and similarly in right midfielder, Fahad Al Muwalad is in red because he was replaced. So for right midfielders, of course, we had nominated Al Muwalad as the starter, thinking that he would be back. There doesn't seem to be a suitable replacement, though, and we're actually thinking they might abandon the 4-2-3-1 formation, which they so often used, now that he is gone. So a bit of a wrench in the works for manager Hervé Renard in dealing with his absence. Left wingers and right wingers, they don't really use the position, so no one there. And now we get to Salman Al Faraj, and we're kind of struggling with this one. First of all, they don't always use the central attacking midfielder position, so he is actually only being called up for about half the games after World Cup qualifying. So from that perspective, we don't see him as a starter, and yet he is the captain of the squad, and he also does play some games in the central midfield. So for those reasons, we're going to nominate him as a starter. And I'm not dead sure why he missed so many games. And onto the forward line. We had not been able to decide between Firas Al Burakein and Salah Al Sheri. Actually, I was leaning towards Sheri because he has a better scoring percentage. However, after recent friendlies, it seems clear that Al Burakein will start, having started most of those friendlies. So we have to, on evidence, nominate Al Burakein as the starter there. Okay, well, closing thoughts. We're not going to repeat everything we said in the team podcast when we really gave our opinions about their prospect. Rather, we're just answering this question: does the selection change our opinion about their chances? And I would say slightly. Even though it's only one player that they lost, it is the guy who scores their goals, Mualad, Al Mualad. And that's a huge loss, and it may even force them to change the formation that they use, the formation that they're so familiar with. They changed it in the absence of Al Mualad, so that's a really big change right before the tournament. I'm also really concerned about the goals that they lose with Al Mualad leaving. We saw very low scoring friendlies there, and we saw them kind of struggling with teams that are way lower quality than the teams that they'll meet in this cup. So I think they'll be respectable defensively. I don't think they'll lose by a lot, but I can't see how they're going to win and get the points they need if they can't put the ball in the net. So I'm kind of hoping that one of the forwards will really kind of come into prominence here. I was kind of thinking it may be Salah Al Sheri, but actually Firas Al Burakein seems to be the starting forward. Anyway, it doesn't matter who does it, but they need someone to emerge and put the ball in the net in order to do well in this cup. And I think losing Al Mualad is really a blow as far as that goes. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of this podcast. And keep in mind, we may be editing together a list of the bios of the 26 final candidates. And if we do that, it'll probably come out in the first few days of the Cup. I'm not sure we'll have time to do it, although I kind of do want to create it for myself so that I can review the squad before I see the team play. Anyway, keep an eye on us at soccerphiles.canada. That's soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end, and our website, soccerphiles.captivate.fm. Or check the show notes for links to our website and previous podcast series. And I hope this helps you enjoy the Cup that much more. And I hope also we'll see you in our next mediacast. Bye-bye.